Hi, I'm Rabbi Pinchas Landis from Cleveland, Ohio. So here we are on yet another Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is something that's been on the Jewish calendar now for thousands of years, dating back to when the Jews were wandering in the desert. Imagine the scene. The Jews are poised to go into the land of Israel, but they decide they want to send in spies first because they don't have enough faith in the words of the Almighty and the words of their teacher Moshe. So they want to send in spies to see what to expect in the land of Israel. And those spies come back with a negative report. And that negative report is that this land is not something we can conquer. It's too big, too vast. There's giants. We can't do it. And the Jewish people accept this negative report on that night. And they start crying. And they cry, and they cry, and they cry. At which point, according to the Talmud, the Almighty says to the Jewish people that you cried this meaningless cry on this night. I'm going to establish a crying for all generations. And that night was Tisha B'Av. And that's where this concept came from, that this day would be the lightning rod for Jewish tragedy. Now, why is it that because we cried, because we didn't think we could make it in the land of Israel, that made it that from that point forward, the Jewish people have a day where so many tragedies have fallen? The destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple, the destruction of the city of Beitar, the expulsion of the Jews from England, the outbreak of World War I, which continued with World War II, the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, so many things. So many things have happened here on Tisha B'Av. And even those things that we can't attach to the calendar day of Tisha B'Av. All the tragedies of Jewish history are a result of the Jewish people being in exile, to the Jewish people being scattered throughout the world. Why is it that cry was so negative? The truth is, it wasn't that Tisha B'Av, or the result in Tisha B'Av, is a punishment for the Jews crying. It was a result. Because the Jewish people are saying, we're not great enough. We can't do this. We're nothing special. We can't march into the land of Israel and just take it over. And Hashem said, you just don't get it. You are great enough. You are strong enough. You are an amazing people. And once you realize that, then there will be no reason for the Jewish people ever to cry. But because you don't realize it now, and as long as you don't realize it, you're going to continue to cry on this day of Tisha B'Av. And we just have to look at our history to see how it's played out. That in every generation, as we say in the Passover Haggadah, B'chol dor v'dor, omdim aleinu l'chalu seinu, that in every single generation they rise up to try and destroy us. V'hakadosh baruch hu matzi leinu miyadam. But in the end, the Almighty saves us from their hand. So this is the plight of the Jewish people, that in every single generation, they rise up to try and destroy us. That's what we have to deal with. And look at our present situation, where we have this rise in anti-Semitism ever since the October 7th massacre, where we have Jews being treated unfairly on college campuses, where we have Jews being yelled at, where we have mass mobs saying down with the Jews. What is this all about? And it's shaking up everybody. It's shaking us to our core. Now, one of the reasons it shakes us to our core so much is because we've had a reprieve here for the past 50 years or so, where the Jewish people have been treated relatively fairly in America and in other places in the world. Now that's starting to change, and so we're all shaken up. But we have to realize that that's really the norm of Jewish history. Jewish history has always been that they try and destroy us, that they always try and wipe us out, that they always try and put us down. Why is this? So in truth, we can look back to one of the first anti-Semitic incidents ever in the world. And that was when the Jews were in Egypt. So you know the story. The Jews go down to Egypt. Everything's great. There's a Jewish viceroy named Yosef. The Jews get their own special suburb to live in named Pisom and Ramses. And everything is great for the Jews. They're living a glorious life in Egypt. But then, all of a sudden, things start to change. A new Pharaoh arises. He enslaves the Jews, puts them to work. He starts killing the Jewish babies, and things get really, really difficult until the point where we cry out, and Hashem sends Moshe. He brings the 10 plagues, and we get out of Egypt. That's the story, as I'm sure you all know. But Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky tells us something fascinating about this story. He says, in truth, this story is the blueprint for all of Jewish history. Why? Because we have to look at what happens when the Jews go down to Egypt. At first, they realize they're different. At first, they remember that they're Jews. And the privileged life that they are given by their cousin and uncle and brother Yosef is fine for them at first. But then they get a little too comfortable. They start to forget that they're the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they become Egyptians. They start to live their lives just like any other Egyptian. And Hashem says, guys, that's not the deal. You're in exile. You have to remember you're in exile. And if you can't remember that you are in exile on your own, unfortunately, I'm going to have to make you remember that you're in exile. And that's when the slavery starts. That's when the babies start getting thrown into the Nile. That's when life becomes really difficult. Eventually, when we get to the point where we cry out and we say, Hashem, take us out of this. We don't want to be in exile anymore. And says Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, that is the blueprint for Jewish history. Because we can look at every single stop that we have made throughout Jewish history. And it all follows this blueprint of what happened when the Jews were in Egypt. Different stops in Europe. We get there. We settle down. We start to figure out the way. We become a little too comfortable. We become a little less connected to our Jewish history. And all of a sudden, someone comes around, wants to kick us out, and we have to go somewhere else. That's what happened in Spain in the 15th century. That's what happened in Poland. That's what happened in every place the Jews have ever been. And now we come to the 21st century, where we've been here, in the case of America, we've been here since the late 19th century, when Jews came en masse. 2.5 million Jews immigrate from the Russian Empire into America within 40 years, and we start to build the community. And at first, we keep to ourselves. Then we become a little too comfortable. Then some of us, unfortunately, start to lose their connection to the Jewish people. And my friends, I believe that we're at that point in Jewish history where the Almighty is looking down from above, and He's saying, guys, you forgot what you're supposed to be. You forgot who you are. You forgot who the Jewish people are supposed to be. And now, if you can't remember it on your own, I'm going to have to send you reminders. Rav Noach Weinberg, the great founder of Aish HaTorah, tells a beautiful story. He says he was once speaking in a certain community, and there was a guy sitting there listening throughout his speech, very attentive, nodding in agreement to everything that the great rabbi said. And this man was not your typical attendee of a Jewish Torah lecture. He had tattoos going up both arms. He had a mohawk haircut. He was wearing a leather jacket, but he's nodding in agreement to everything that Rav Noach Weinberg is saying. Rav Noach goes up to the man afterwards and says, there's got to be a story here. He says, did you like the lecture? He says, yeah, Rabbi, I agree with everything you said. In fact, me and the Almighty, we are like this. You are like this, says Rav Noach Weinberg. Rav Noach said, I live in the city of Jerusalem, and there are many, many, many holy Jews in the city of Jerusalem. But I don't know if any of them would describe their relationship with the Almighty as being like this. What's so special about your relationship? He said, Rabbi, let me tell you a story. One day, I don't know if you can tell by looking at me, but I'm a biker. Oh, really? I didn't know that. One day I'm riding my motorcycle down a mountain road, and it's late at night, and this is a small mountain road, and there's maybe 2 lanes, but not really enough room for 2 cars. And all of a sudden I see coming in the other direction an 18-wheeler coming up this road. And the 18-wheeler barely sees me, and he's taking up the whole entire road, and he's getting closer, and I'm realizing that this is a very complicated situation, and I realize that I have a choice now. I can either stay on this road and be impounded by this 18-wheeler truck, or I can go off the mountain and whatever happens will happen. Rabbi, I choose to go off the mountain. All of a sudden, a tree catches me as I go off the mountain. My bike falls below, breaks into a million pieces, and I survive the situation. So Rabbi, that's why I tell you that me and the Almighty, we're like this. At which point, Rav Noach shakes his head and looks at the man and he says, who do you think it was who pushed you off the mountain in the first place? My friends, when difficult things happen to us, they happen for a reason. They're there quite often to wake us up, to get us to realize that we're doing something wrong. Have you ever taken your kids or grandkids to go bumper bowling? You know, bumper bowling is the metaphor for life. Because what happens in bumper bowling, they have these nice things they put in the gutter of the bowling lane, and no matter how bad you are at bowling, you throw the ball down, and you know you won't get a gutter ball. Because you can throw that ball, and what happens is that it will go bang against one bumper, and it'll go clank against the other bumper, and eventually it'll bounce its way down till it hits a few of the pins down. My friends, that's life. And that's our relationship with the Almighty. The Almighty looks at us and He sees that we're about to fall into a bumper. We're about to fall into a gutter where everything is going to fall apart. And so what's He do? He gives us a zetz. He gives us a knock. And we go flying the other direction. And we go moving along. And sometimes we're about to hit the gutter once again. And again, another knock. But it sends us back in the right direction. And that's the whole purpose of anti-Semitism. That's why the first temple was destroyed. That's why the second temple was destroyed. That's why every tragedy that has befallen the Jewish people has happened. Because sometimes we need a wake-up call. Sometimes we need to realize that what we're doing is just not right. And just like the Jews in Egypt were doing things they weren't supposed to, so they had to be woken up by Pharaoh. So too we're woken up. And that's what I believe the Jewish people are going through in the world today. The Jewish people are getting a wake-up call. The Almighty is saying, guys, don't forget who you are. Don't forget where you come from. And don't forget where you're going. A story is told of one of the Rothschilds, the great, wealthy patrons of European Jewry. And a pauper came to Mr. Rothschild one day to collect money. And Rothschild was in a good mood that day, so he asked the pauper, he said, my friend, what would you do if you had all my money? At which point the pauper looks back at Mr. Rothschild and says, Mr. Rothschild, if I had all your money, do you think I would walk from door to door asking for charity? I would hire a carriage to take me from door to door to ask for charity. The mindset of the oni, of the pauper, is that he is a pauper. And he can't envision a life outside of being a pauper. And he imagines that if I were a rich man, I would hire a carriage to take me from door to door as opposed to walking. Because that's all that he can imagine. That's all that he can see in life. And my friends, I have a feeling that sometimes we're the same way. Let me tell you an interesting idea from the Sifsei Chaim. The Sifsei Chaim talks about a statement that is often used to attribute people who are forward-focusing in a Jewish sense. And that is that they're referred to as a Ben Olam Haba, which translates directly as a child of the world to come. Well, that's a very funny way to talk about a person who's forward-focused, who's growth-oriented as a Jew, that they are a child of the world to come. But Rav Chaim Friedlander, the Sifsei Chaim, explains that's not exactly what it means. The words aren't meant to be taken literally. That quite often in Judaism, we will use that term of calling someone a child of something to show that they are connected to that thing. For example, that when we have a family has their children and everyone who lives in the house, the nuclear family, but quite often there's friends of the children, whatever it is, that are very much a part of that house. They spend a lot of time in that house. They go there for Shabbos meals. They hang out a lot with that family. We'll refer to that person as a ben abayis or a bas abayis, which literally means a child of the house. Now, we know the person isn't literally a child of the house, but they're figuratively a child of the house because they're so connected to that family. That's what it means to be a ben olam haba, a child of the world to come. It means we're focused on the world to come. We're focused on the promises that our prophets give for the Jewish people. That one day there will be a time when the Jewish people are united in the land of Israel. When we're together in the land of Israel. When we all live in the land of Israel. And we'll have a perfect sovereignty, not the imperfect sovereignty like we have today with our Arab cousins constantly challenging our sovereignty on the land of Israel, not with the suicide bombings and the attacks from Hamas, not with the rockets from Iran, none of that. And not only that, but none of the anti-Semitism across the world. It'll cease to exist because the Jewish people will have come to our fruition. We will have gotten to where we need to go. And therefore, on this Tisha B'Av, let's make a commitment that we are going to be B'nai Olam Haba. We're going to be people that are focused on the world to come, the world that the Jewish people are supposed to have, when we have our final redemption, when we return to the land of Israel, and when our neighbors no longer try to destroy us. Because that's the promise of our prophets. And let's not be like that pauper who can't envision a life outside of what we live. So often we're trapped in that. We look towards the future and we plan for a beautiful life when we'll be retired, when we can have a house in Miami, when our grandkids come to visit us, whatever it is. And that's what we imagine. That's the pauper talking about hiring a carriage to take him from door to door. We should be anticipating a life where the Jewish people are united. Look how fractured we are now, but we can be united. When we all live in the land of Israel, when we have a government that we love and respect, that's led by Melech HaMashiach, by the King Messiah. Our neighbors appreciate us. They want us to be there. They look at what we bring to the world by being there. That's how we should envision our future. Let's not be like Rothschild's pauper. Let's be a ben olam haba. Let's be focused on the world to come and what is ahead of us and what we can anticipate as Jews and what we're told from our prophets is going to happen. There's a fascinating medrash that's brought down about when Moses comes down with the second set of tablets. The Medrash describes that the Jewish people see Moshe from afar carrying the tablets, and this is after a long course of many difficult things. Don't forget that it started with the golden calf, the first set of tablets being smashed, Moshe taking 80 days to clean up this whole mess and go back up and get the second set of tablets. So the Jewish people see Moshe from afar coming down finally with that second set of tablets, and they start to cry. They start to cry, and they cry, and they cry. Tears, not meaningless tears, like the Talmud tells us the Jews cried on that first Tisha B'Av that we mentioned before, but tears of slicha and kapara, tears of happiness, tears where they're so happy that they were finally forgiven by the Almighty for the transgressions of the golden calf, for the transgressions that brought them to this point. And Hashem says, because you're crying these proper tears of appreciation, of happiness, of forgiveness and atonement, I'm going to establish this day as a day of slicha v'kapara, a day of forgiveness and atonement for all generations. And that, my friends, was the creation of Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur are often contrasted to each other. Tisha B'Av is black, Yom Kippur is white. We fast for 25 hours on both days. Tisha B'Av is like a day in hell, But Yom Kippur is like a day in heaven. We're angels on Yom Kippur. And why is it so special? Because whatever happened in the past year is erased on Yom Kippur. We start anew. So just like these tears brought about Tisha B'Av, because we didn't realize our greatness, we didn't realize who we are as the Jewish people, they have the same ability to bring about a Yom Kippur, a day that has the power to clean the slate and wipe the slate completely clean. We just have to realize who we are. We have to realize that we're not that pauper going from door to door in a carriage. No, we have to realize that we are the Jewish people and that we're destined for greatness, a greatness so much greater than we've ever had, and that is beyond our wildest dreams. And that's what we have to focus on. And if we can focus collectively on this as a Jewish people, this will be our last Tisha B'Av. This will be the last time we have to sit on the floor and fast and cry and read those lamentations, because we'll see the true redemption of the Jewish people. I want to close with a story I once heard. The story is about a survivor of Auschwitz. And he was sitting there at his grandson's bar mitzvah, just enjoying the scene, taken in the scene of seeing a grandson come to be a bar mitzvah in the Jewish people. And someone asked him, how did you do it? How did you survive everything that you survived? Auschwitz, coming out of Auschwitz, rebuilding a Jewish life, raising kids to be good, solid Jews. How did you do it? He said, it's very simple. One day in Auschwitz, it was a dark day for me. I had decided that I couldn't go on anymore. And I was ready to throw myself on the fences to put an end to my life. And my job in the work camps was to schlep these big logs that they use for train rails, they use for train tracks, to schlep them back and forth all day long, morning, evening. I would be schlepping these big pieces of wood back and forth, so the Germans could lay the rail lines. And on that day, when I had had enough, when I couldn't take it anymore, I looked on to one of those pieces of wood, and etched into the wood are the words, Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker. The fact that the Jewish people are eternal is not a lie. It's true. We're an eternal person. We are eternal people. We, as a Jewish people, live forever. Just look at what we survived. Of course, the rest of the prophecy has to be true that we will live forever. And on that day, that statement gave me such a chizah, gave me such strength that I was able to persevere one more day, and then another day, and then another day, until I finally got out of the camps and was able to rebuild my life and put this beautiful family together. We don't know who the person was who etched that statement, Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishaker, into the wood. But that person was able to awaken in this Jew the fact that no matter what we go through, we're here for a purpose. And the trials and tribulations are there for us to grow from. They're there to get us back on the path that we might have strayed from. And therefore, this Tisha B'Av, let's make that commitment. That whatever we're doing in our lives as Jews, we're going to do just a little bit more. The Almighty doesn't want us to make these grandiose steps because He knows as well as we know that when we step too far, we fall down. But baby steps. Baby steps. Let's look at our lives and see what we can do just a little bit better. If we don't light Shabbos candles, let's start lighting Shabbos candles. If we never put on tefillin, let's put on tefillin once a week. If we never pray, let's start with saying the Shema. If we don't learn Torah regularly, let's start learning once a week for 10 minutes. If we don't give tzedakah, let's give tzedakah once a week, a small amount. Start with the baby steps. And then when it becomes inculcated into who you are, let's add to it. Because that's how a person becomes a Ben Olam Haba. That's how a person becomes focused on where the Jewish people are going. And if we can all do this, if we can all get to this point as the Jewish people, I guarantee you that this will be the last time we ever have to deal with Tisha B'Av. I thank you so much for listening.